What would you do if you discovered that the person you treated with suspicion and disrespect was actually the solution to all your problems? Victoria Ashworth thought she knew everything about her driver Marcus, until she overheard him speaking perfect Spanish about million-dollar business deals. "Those Chinese investors are impossible," she had complained, while the man sitting in her front seat possessed the exact expertise she desperately needed. But when fear and prejudice clouded her judgment, Victoria made a decision that nearly cost her everything. "What language were you speaking?" she demanded suspiciously, never imagining that Marcus held a PhD and years of diplomatic experience. This incredible story will challenge everything you think you know about assumptions, prejudice, and hidden potential. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now. Subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Victoria Ashworth adjusted her diamond bracelet as she waited in her marble-floored foyer, checking her Rolex for the third time. The luxury chauffeur service had promised their best available driver would arrive by 8 a.m. sharp. When the sleek black Mercedes pulled into her circular driveway, Victoria's manicured fingers tapped impatiently against the window. A tall, well-built black man stepped out, dressed in a crisp navy suit. He walked with quiet confidence toward her door.
Mrs. Ashworth.
Marcus Williams extended his hand professionally.
À Marcus, your assigned driver from Premier Executive Service.
Victoria barely glanced at his outstretched hand, instead walking past him toward the car. "Finally. I have 3 important meetings today, and I cannot afford delays." Marcus opened the rear door gracefully. "Of course, ma'am. I've reviewed your schedule and mapped the most efficient routes." "Reviewed my schedule?"
Victoria slid into the leather seat, her tone sharp.
I didn't realize drivers could read these days. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I always prepare thoroughly, ma'am. Punctuality and professionalism are my priorities." As they drove through the affluent neighborhood, Victoria made a call to her assistant. "Sarah, make sure to keep an eye on our new driver. You never know with these people. Run a background check if necessary." Marcus's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, but he continued driving smoothly, his eyes focused on the road ahead. He had endured worse than casual racism from employers, though it never stopped stinging. "And Sarah," Victoria continued loudly, ensuring Marcus could hear, "make sure he understands he's here to drive, not think. I don't need any opinions from the help." In the rearview mirror, Marcus caught Victoria's cold stare. He had 2 choices: respond and risk losing the job he desperately needed, or swallow his dignity once again. The bills at home made the decision for him. "Understood, ma'am," he said quietly, though every word burned. The following week, Marcus had settled into a routine of silent endurance. Victoria's condescending remarks had become background noise, though they still cut deep. Today, he was driving her to a crucial business meeting with potential investors. "Marcus, wait in the car," Victoria commanded as they arrived at the luxury restaurant. "This is important business, not something you'd understand." Through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus could see Victoria gesticulating animatedly at a table with 3 men in expensive suits. One was James Whitmore, her business partner, who Marcus had met briefly. The other 2 appeared to be potential Asian investors. An hour later, Victoria stormed out, her face flushed with frustration. James followed closely behind, loosening his tie in obvious agitation. "Those Chinese investors are impossible," Victoria snapped as she slammed the car door. "They kept talking about cultural sensitivity and proper protocols. What do they expect from us?"
James slid into the front passenger seat, turning to face Victoria.
"Maybe we should have brought an interpreter or cultural consultant. They seemed offended when you mentioned their Oriental business practices." "Oriental, Chinese, Japanese. What's the difference?" Victoria waved dismissively. "Business is business. They're just being difficult." Marcus's knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel. He had spent years working with Chinese diplomats and understood exactly where Victoria had gone wrong. The term Oriental was considered outdated and offensive, and her dismissive attitude toward cultural nuances had likely destroyed any chance of partnership. "Maybe if we understood their customs better," Marcus began carefully. Did I ask for your input?
Victoria's voice cut like ice.
Drive us to the office. I don't need business advice from someone whose biggest decision is which route to take. Marcus fell silent, though his mind raced with solutions Victoria couldn't see. He had successfully mediated similar cultural misunderstandings during his diplomatic career, but his skin color had apparently disqualified him from having valuable insights in Victoria's eyes. The irony wasn't lost on him. She desperately needed exactly the expertise she was dismissing. The next morning, Marcus waited outside Victoria's house as usual, but today felt different. His phone buzzed with an international call. Wei Chendashi, Marcus answered in fluent Mandarin, his voice warm and professional.
Ni hao ma.
Ambassador Chen Wei's familiar voice came through clearly.
Marcus, Maifrien.
I have urgent news about the trade dispute between the textile manufacturers. Your analysis was brilliant. The mediation proposal worked perfectly. Marcus glanced toward Victoria's house, then continued in Mandarin. I'm glad the cultural bridge-building approach succeeded. Sometimes understanding faces matters more than understanding contracts. Exactly. The Beijing office wants to offer you a consulting position. Part-time, of course, since you mentioned preferring flexible work currently. That's wonderful news, Chen. Let me consider it carefully. As Marcus ended the call, Victoria emerged from her house, designer handbag clutched tightly. She had heard the unfamiliar sounds of his conversation, and her expression showed clear suspicion. What was that gibberish? She demanded as she settled into the back seat. Just a personal call, ma'am, Marcus replied diplomatically.
Personnel.
Victoria's tone sharpened. That didn't sound like English to me. What language were you speaking?
Mandarin, Maem.
Victoria's eyebrows shot up.
Mandarin?
How does someone like you know Chinese? Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang again. This time, Dr. Amara Okafor's voice filled the speaker in rapid Yoruba.
Marcus, Mojebo PON ce consultant workni. Bao hello ce de tek position yi.
Marcus, I heard you're doing consulting work. How did you get this position? Marcus switched to Yoruba naturally. Amara, MOTI explained situation Ifa ni tella. Mo fe kien maintain flexibility for now. Amara, I've explained this situation to you before. I want to maintain flexibility for now. Victoria's mouth dropped open. 2 different foreign languages in 10 minutes? Her driver was speaking what sounded like Chinese and something African. Her mind immediately jumped to the worst conclusions. Excuse me, she interrupted loudly. What exactly are you discussing? And why are you conducting suspicious foreign conversations while you're supposed to be working for me? Marcus ended the call quickly. These are professional consultations, Mrs. Ashworth.
Nothing suspicieux. Professionnel consultation. Victoria Loguet d'Archly. You're a driver, not a professionnel.
I want to know exactly who you're talking to and why you're speaking in code.
The word code stung Marcus deeply.
His languages weren't codes. They were bridges to cultures and communities Victoria couldn't begin to understand. But explaining would likely make things worse. I assure you, ma'am, there's nothing inappropriate about my calls. Victoria pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Sarah, I need you to investigate our driver immediately. He's conducting suspicious foreign communications. Sarah Mitchell's investigation had yielded frustratingly little information. Marcus Williams had a clean driving record, no criminal background, and glowing references from the chauffeur service. But Victoria's paranoia had only intensified. There has to be something, Victoria insisted during their morning briefing. Normal drivers don't speak multiple foreign languages and take international calls constantly. Maybe he's just educated? Sarah suggested carefully. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Educated people don't become drivers, Sarah. There's something he's hiding. That afternoon, as Marcus waited outside Victoria's attorney's office, his phone rang with another international call. This time it was in Arabic. Ahlan wa sahlan Marcus, came the warm greeting from his former colleague at the UN.
Kefalak. Hello Marcus, how are you?
Marcus responded fluently in Arabic, discussing a complex trade mediation case. Through the office window, Victoria watched with growing alarm. Arabic? Now her driver was speaking what she assumed was the language of terrorists and suspicious foreign actors. Her phone buzzed with a text to Sarah, "Record everything. I think our driver might be involved in something dangerous." When Marcus finished his call, Victoria's tension was palpable. "That sounded like Arabic," she accused.
Yes, ma'am.
"Why does a driver need to speak Arabic?" Her voice rose with each word. "Personal relationships, ma'am. I have friends from various backgrounds." "Friends?" Victoria's tone dripped with disbelief.
What kind of friends?
"Are you involved in some kind of international network?" Marcus felt a familiar weight in his chest, the burden of being presumed guilty because of his race and education. "No, ma'am. Just friends and former colleagues." "Former colleagues from where?"
Marcus hésita tête.
Revealing his UN background might only fuel Victoria's suspicions about foreign connections. "Previous employment, ma'am."
Victoria's imagination ran wild.
Foreign languages, international calls, evasive answers. In her mind, Marcus had become a potential security threat rather than an overqualified employee. "I want copies of all his call records," she texted Sarah frantically. Marcus noticed Victoria's increasingly hostile stares in the rearview mirror. He had experienced workplace discrimination before, but this felt different, more dangerous. Victoria wasn't just dismissing his qualifications, she was creating a narrative where his intelligence and connections became threats. The irony was crushing. The same international expertise Victoria desperately needed for her business was being weaponized against him in her suspicious mind. Victoria had reached her breaking point. After 3 days of what she perceived as suspicious foreign activities, she decided to take action. As Marcus drove her to the office that morning, she leaned forward aggressively. "Stop the car," she commanded. Marcus pulled over safely, confusion evident in his voice. "Is something wrong, ma'am?"
Victoria's voice trembled with Baroli contrôlait de rage.
"I know what you're doing. All these secret phone calls in foreign languages, these mysterious conversations. I won't have a security risk working for me." "Ma'am, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you're using your position to conduct suspicious international activities. How you're probably selling information or worse." Marcus turned in his seat, his professional composure cracking. "Mrs. Ashworth, you're making serious accusations without any evidence." "Evidence?" Victoria's voice rose to a shout. "I have recordings of you speaking Arabic, Chinese, and God knows what other languages. What innocent driver needs to speak terrorist languages?"
The word terrorist hit Marcus like a physical blow.
Years of education, diplomatic service, and professional achievement reduced to racist stereotypes because he dared to be multilingual while black. "Those aren't terrorist languages," Marcus said quietly, his dignity intact despite the assault. "They're languages of diplomacy, trade, and friendship."
Victoria was beyond listening.
"I'm calling the police right now. And you're fired. Get out of my car immediately."
This is your car, ma'am. I'm your driver, remember? Not anymore.
Victoria fumbled for her phone. "James was right about people like you. We should never have trusted people like me." Marcus's voice carried years of suppressed pain. "What exactly do you mean by that, Mrs. Ashworth?" Victoria's racism finally emerged fully. "You know exactly what I mean. Coming into our communities, taking jobs, speaking in code, plotting who knows what."
"I want you gone."
Marcus stepped out of the car with quiet dignity. "I'll call the service to send a replacement. Your prejudice is showing, Mrs. Ashworth." As he walked away, Victoria screamed after him, "Don't you dare lecture me."
"I know what you are."
Marcus kept walking, his head held high, though his heart broke at the injustice.
Another job lost to fear and ignorance.
3 weeks after firing Marcus, Victoria's world began crumbling. The Spanish investors Roberto Santos had promised to meet were her last hope for saving the company's international expansion. "Mrs. Ashworth," Roberto's heavily accented voice came through the phone, I must insist on proper cultural protocol for our meeting. My investors require someone who understands Spanish business customs and can communicate respectfully. Victoria's hand trembled as she gripped the phone. Of course, Mr. Santos. We're very culturally sensitive. Excellent. Then you will have a proper Spanish-speaking representative present? Someone who understands the nuances of international business relationships. Victoria's mind raced frantically. Absolutely.
We have extensive international experience.
After hanging up, she immediately called Sarah.
Emergency meeting.
Now. Sarah arrived to find Victoria pacing frantically in her office. The Spanish deal is our only lifeline, Sarah. If we lose this, we're finished. What do they need? Someone who speaks Spanish fluently and understands international business protocol. Someone who can make them feel respected and understood. Sarah looked confused. Don't you speak some Spanish from college? Hola and gracias won't cut it for a multi-million-dollar negotiation.
Victoria snapped.
These people want cultural sensitivity, proper etiquette, someone who actually knows what they're doing.
The irony hit Sarah first.
Didn't Marcus speak Spanish? And several other languages. Victoria's face went pale. Marcus was a security risk. A driver pretending to know languages. But what if he actually did know them? What if he really was qualified?
Victoria felt sick.
The memory of Marcus's confident phone conversations suddenly took on new meaning. What if those weren't suspicious activities, but actual professional consultations? Find me a Spanish-speaking business consultant immediately, Victoria ordered, refusing to consider the obvious solution. But as call after call yielded only expensive consultants with limited availability, Victoria faced a terrifying realization. She might have fired exactly the person she desperately needed. The meeting with Roberto Santos was in 2 days, and Victoria had no one qualified to help her save her company. Victoria's desperation had reached new heights. 2 expensive consultants had already declined her rushed request, citing insufficient time to prepare properly for such an important international negotiation. With less than 24 hours remaining, she sat in her car outside a luxury hotel, waiting for her assistant Sarah to deliver what might be her final hope, documents from a Spanish business protocol expert. As she waited, a familiar figure emerged from the hotel's revolving door. Marcus Williams, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, walked confidently toward the valet station while speaking animatedly on his phone.
Victoria's briscoed.
What was her former driver doing at the most expensive hotel in the city, dressed like a successful businessman?
Señora Petrov, Marcus Wesain imperfect, fluent Spanish. Entiendo completamente sus preocupaciones sobre la fusión. La integración cultural será crucial para el éxito.
Mrs. Petrov, I completely understand your concerns about the merger. Cultural integration will be crucial for success.
Victoria's mouth fell open.
Marcus wasn't just speaking Spanish. He was discussing complex business mergers with sophisticated vocabulary and professional confidence she had never heard from him before.
Por supuesto, Marcus continued. Mi experiencia en negociaciones internacionales me ha enseñado que la confianza mutua es más valiosa que cualquier contrato.
Of course, my experience in international negotiations has taught me that mutual trust is more valuable than any contract. Marcus paused, listening intently to the voice on the other end. Elena, I understand your father's concerns about the American partners. Perhaps I could facilitate a cultural briefing session before the final negotiations. Victoria realized with growing shock that Marcus was consulting on exactly the type of high-level international deal she desperately needed help with. This wasn't a driver making personal calls. This was a professional conducting sophisticated business in multiple languages. The merger between the Russian Textile Consortium and the American manufacturers requires delicate cultural navigation, Marcus continued in flawless Spanish. I've handled similar cases during my diplomatic career. Diplomatic career?
Victoria's world tilted.
Her suspicious driver had been a diplomat? As Marcus ended his call and walked toward a waiting luxury car, Victoria sat frozen in disbelief. Everything she had assumed about him had been completely wrong. Her racist prejudices had blinded her to the reality that Marcus was exactly the qualified professional she now desperately needed. The man she had fired as a security risk was consulting on multi-million-dollar international deals. Her phone buzzed with a text from Roberto Santos. Reminder: tomorrow's meeting requires proper Spanish cultural protocol.
No exception.
Victoria stared at Marcus's retreating figure, the devastating realization hitting her: she had destroyed her own solution. Victoria's hands shook as she dialed Marcus's number for the first time since firing him.
The phone rang twice, 3 times.
When his professional voice answered, she almost lost courage.
Marcus Williams speaking. Marcus, this is Victoria Ashworth.
The words felt like broken glass in her throat.
Allons pause. Mrs. Ashworth.
How can I help you? His tone was polite but distant, and Victoria heard the hurt she had caused beneath his professionalism.
Marcus, he need to speak with you.
Urgently. About what, ma'am? Victoria closed her eyes, swallowing what remained of her pride. I made a terrible mistake. I saw you today, outside the Marriott, speaking Spanish about business negotiations. I didn't know.
Another pause.
Know what, Mrs. Ashworth? That you're actually qualified. That you really do know these languages professionally.
Her voice cracked.
I have a crucial meeting tomorrow with Spanish investors, and I desperately need someone who understands international business protocol. Marcus's silence stretched uncomfortably. When he finally spoke, his voice carried years of suppressed frustration. Let me understand this correctly. 3 weeks ago, you fired me for speaking foreign languages, called me a security risk, and threatened to call the police. Now you want my help because you've discovered I actually possess the qualifications you refuse to acknowledge. Victoria felt tears threatening. Yes. I know I was wrong. I know I treated you terribly. Mrs. Ashworth, you didn't just treat me terribly. You accused me of being a terrorist because I spoke Arabic with former colleagues. You assumed I was conducting criminal activities because I'm educated and multilingual.
The truth hit Victoria like a physical blow. You're right.
I was racist and ignorant.
Yes, you were.
Marcus's voice remained steady but firm. So tell me, what exactly has changed?
Based your desperate need for my help.
Victoria broke down completely. Nothing has changed about me, Marcus. I'm still the same prejudiced person who hurt you. But my company is dying, and you're the only person I know who might be able to save it. And why should I help the woman who called my languages terrorist code? Because. Victoria struggled for words. Because maybe you're a better person than I am. Because maybe you can see past my ignorance to help someone who doesn't deserve it. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Ashworth, I have a PhD in international relations from Georgetown. I spent 8 years as a UN diplomat specializing in cross-cultural business mediation. I speak 8 languages fluently. I left diplomacy because I witnessed corruption and chose honest work instead.
Victoria's tears flowed freely now. Oh God, Marcus. What have you done?
You saw a black man and assumed the worst, Marcus said simply. Now you need that same black man to save your business. Will you help me?
Victoria whispered.
I'll consider it. But on my terms. Marcus agreed to meet Victoria at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop downtown. When Victoria arrived, she found him already seated, reviewing documents on his tablet. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. Thank you for coming, Victoria said as she sat down across from him. Marcus closed his tablet and leaned back. Before we discuss your business problem, I think you deserve to understand exactly who you fired. Victoria nodded, bracing herself. I graduated summa cum laude from Howard University with degrees in international relations and linguistics. I earned my PhD from Georgetown while working part-time at the State Department. By age 25, I was working as a cultural attaché at the UN. Victoria listened in stunned silence. I specialized in mediating trade disputes between culturally different nations. I've negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I've sat across from presidents, prime ministers, and CEOs, helping them understand each other across cultural and linguistic barriers. Marcus paused, his voice taking on a pained tone. 3 years ago, I discovered that my supervisor was taking bribes to favor certain countries in trade negotiations. When I reported it, I was told to keep quiet for the good of my career. When I refused, I was systematically frozen out.
So you left.
I resigned rather than compromise my integrity. But whistleblowers don't get good references in diplomatic circles. I took the chauffeur job to pay bills while I figured out my next steps. Victoria felt nauseated by her own ignorance. The phone calls I heard. Former colleagues consulting me on cases similar to the ones I used to handle officially. Dr. Okafor needed help with a Nigerian trade dispute. Ambassador Chun wanted advice on cultural sensitivity training. Elena Petrov's father was considering American business partnerships. And I accused you of terrorism.
Marcus's expression ardennait.
You heard Arabic and immediately thought terrorist. You heard Chinese and assumed suspicious activities. You couldn't conceive that a black man driving your car might actually be more qualified than you to handle international business. Victoria buried her face in her hands. I destroyed your life based on racist assumptions. You tried to, Marcus corrected. But I've survived worse than your prejudice. The question now is whether you've learned anything from this experience. Victoria looked up, tears streaming down her face. I've learned that I'm everything I thought I wasn't. I considered myself enlightened, educated, progressive. But the moment I felt threatened by your intelligence, I became exactly the kind of person I claimed to despise. Marcus studied her carefully. And what are you going to do with that knowledge? I don't know, Victoria admitted. But I know I can't undo the damage I've done to you. I can only ask for a chance to make it right. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened his tablet and showed her a document. This is the Cultural Protocol Brief for Spanish business negotiations. If we're going to save your company, you need to understand exactly how badly you've been handling international relations. Victoria stared at the detailed document, realizing she was looking at the work of a true professional, one she had nearly destroyed with her ignorance. The next morning, Victoria sat nervously in her office conference room, watching Marcus transform the space for the crucial meeting with Roberto Santos. Gone was any trace of the subservient driver she had hired. This was Dr. Marcus Williams, international relations expert, commanding the room with quiet authority. Roberto Santos comes from a family business that values personal relationships over quick profits, Marcus explained as he arranged the seating. Spanish business culture emphasizes respect, patience, and mutual understanding. Your previous approach of rushing straight to numbers and contracts likely offended him. Victoria nodded, taking notes frantically. What should I do differently? First, we'll begin with proper introductions, not just names and titles, but family background and shared values. Roberto will want to know that you understand the importance of honor and long-term relationships. Marcus moved to the presentation materials Victoria had prepared. These financial projections are impressive, but they shouldn't dominate the conversation. Spanish investors want to see your character first, your competence second. Character. Victoria looked confused. Integrity, loyalty, respect for tradition. Roberto's grandfather started their textile business in 1952. He's not just investing money, he's potentially joining his family legacy with yours. As Marcus continued his briefing, Victoria realized she was witnessing a master at work. Every detail was considered: the arrangement of chairs to promote equality rather than hierarchy, the selection of refreshments that showed cultural awareness, even the timing of different conversation topics. When Roberto arrives, I'll handle the initial cultural protocols in Spanish, then transition to English for the business discussions. This shows respect for his language while ensuring clear communication. Victoria felt overwhelmed. Marcus, I can't possibly learn all of this in an hour. You don't need to learn it, Marcus said gently. You need to trust it. Trust that I understand these relationships and let me guide the conversation appropriately. When Roberto Santos arrived with his two associates, Victoria watched in amazement as Marcus seamlessly shifted into his diplomatic role. His Spanish was not only fluent but elegantly formal, full of cultural nuances that made Roberto's face light up with appreciation.
Senhor Santos, é um honor receber-lo em nuestra oficina. Marcus Began, Easton conveying exactly the right level of respect.
Hemos preparado todo con el mayor cuidado, esperando que se sienta cómodo.
Roberto responded warmly in Spanish, and Victoria realized they were discussing not just business but family, traditions, and shared values. Marcus was building bridges she never could have constructed alone. 2 hours later, as Roberto shook hands with both Victoria and Marcus, his smile was genuine. "Mrs. Ashworth, your cultural advisor has made me feel truly welcomed. This is how international business should be conducted." After Roberto left, Victoria turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes.
You saved my company.
Marcus nodded quietly. "Now the question is what you plan to do with that second chance." Victoria took a deep breath. "I want to offer you a position as Director of International Relations. Not as charity or guilt, but because you're the most qualified person I've ever met for the job." "And the salary?" Victoria named a figure that made Marcus raise his eyebrows. "That's more than fair." "It's what you're worth," Victoria said simply.
What you were always worth.
6 weeks later, Victoria stood before her company's board of directors, a room full of mostly white, mostly male executives who had questioned her decision to hire Marcus as Director of International Relations. "Gentlemen," Victoria began, her voice steady and confident, "I want to share the results of our new international strategy under Dr. Williams' leadership." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation. "In 6 weeks, we've secured partnerships with companies in Spain, Nigeria, China, and Brazil. Our international revenue has increased by 40%.
Murmure of surprise rippled through the room.
More importantly," Victoria continued, "we've established relationships built on mutual respect and cultural understanding. Our partners see us as trustworthy because we've demonstrated that we value their perspectives." Board member James Whitmore raised his hand. "Victoria, this is impressive, but I'm concerned about giving so much authority to someone who was recently just a driver."
Victoria's expression hardened.
"James, Dr. Williams has a PhD from Georgetown and 8 years of diplomatic experience. His qualifications far exceed those of anyone else in this room for international relations." "But his background," James began. "His background is impeccable," Victoria interrupted firmly. "Unless you're suggesting that his race somehow disqualifies him from excellence?" The room fell silent. Victoria had never challenged James so directly before. "Furthermore," Victoria continued, "I'm recommending that we terminate our partnership with Whitmore Consulting. James, your outdated attitudes are liability to this company's future." James stood up angrily.
Victoria, you can't be serious.
"We've been partners for 10 years. 10 years of missed opportunities because we couldn't see past our own prejudices," Victoria replied. "Marcus has accomplished more in 6 weeks than we managed in 10 years of international expansion attempts." The board voted unanimously to accept James's resignation and approve Marcus's promotion to senior director with equity participation in the company. After the meeting, Victoria found Marcus in his new corner office, reviewing proposals from potential partners in 3 different countries. "Thank you," she said simply. Marcus looked up from his work. "For what?" "For being the better person. For helping despite how I treated you. For showing me who I really was." Marcus set down his pen and looked at her seriously. "Victoria, I didn't help you to make you feel better about your racism. I helped because those Spanish workers deserve fair treatment, and because good business relationships benefit everyone involved." Victoria nodded. "I know. And I want you to know that firing James wasn't just about this company. It was about taking responsibility for the culture I allowed to exist here." "Change isn't a single action," Marcus said quietly.
It's a daily choice to be better than you were yesterday.
Victoria smiled sadly. "I have a lot of yesterdays to be better than." "We all do," Marcus replied. "The difference is whether we're willing to do the work." 1 year later, Victoria stood at the entrance of the annual International Business Ethics Conference, watching Marcus deliver the keynote address to an audience of 500 global business leaders. "True international success," Marcus was saying from the podium, "requires more than language skills or cultural knowledge. It requires humility, the recognition that our perspective is just one of many valid ways of seeing the world." Victoria thought back to the woman she had been just 12 months ago, suspicious, prejudiced, and blind to her own ignorance. The transformation hadn't been easy. She had enrolled in diversity training, studied cultural sensitivity, and most importantly, learned to listen more than she spoke. When we approach international partners with genuine respect, Marcus continued, we discover that differences in culture, language, and background are not obstacles to overcome, but strengths to leverage. The audience gave Marcus a standing ovation as he concluded his speech. Victoria applauded proudly, knowing that her company was now recognized as a leader in ethical international business practices. After the conference, Victoria and Marcus walked together toward the parking garage. Marcus, Victoria said, I want to thank you again for taking a chance on me. For believing I could change. Marcus smiled. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. The question is what they do with that chance. As they reached their cars, Victoria remembered something. By the way, I've been meaning to tell you, the company has received 3 awards this year for international partnership excellence. The press wants to interview the visionary leadership behind our success. And what will you tell them?
Victoria Zancer cam without hésitation.
That real leadership means recognizing excellence wherever it comes from, and having the courage to admit when you've been wrong. Marcus nodded approvingly. That's a good start. As they parted ways, Victoria reflected on how profoundly her life had changed. She had almost lost everything because of her prejudices, but in losing those prejudices, she had gained something far more valuable: wisdom, humility, and the partnership of one of the most remarkable professionals she had ever known. The greatest transformation, she realized, hadn't been in her business success, but in her understanding of what it truly meant to see people for who they really are. Dear friend, this powerful story reminds us that our assumptions about others often say more about us than about them. Every day, talented individuals face discrimination based on appearance, accent, or background, while their true potential remains invisible to those who judge by surface impressions. Marcus Williams represents countless professionals whose qualifications are overlooked because of prejudice. Victoria's journey shows us that it's never too late to confront our biases and grow into better versions of ourselves. Real change begins when we choose to see people's abilities rather than our assumptions. If this story touched your heart and opened your mind, please like this video and share it with others who need to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that celebrate human dignity and potential. Together, we can build a world where everyone is valued for who they truly are.